I paid for their dream trip with the money I'd saved my whole life. The only thing I asked for in return was a window seat on the plane. A small thing, right? Just a little corner of the world, seen from above. A chance to dream with them as we soared towards something new. Instead, I received a photo. It flashed across my phone screen, bright and mocking in the dim morning light of my kitchen. Everyone smiling at the airport. David, Sarah, my granddaughter. All of them. A short message underneath. Too casual, too dismissive. We're here. We'll call you from Rome. They left and abandoned me in the silent house that I myself had paid for them to live in. The phone slipped from my fingers, clattering softly on the counter. The sound echoed in the quiet, empty space around me. My heart didn't just break, it solidified, turning into a cold, hard stone in my chest. I stared at that photo, their wide, joyful smiles, the excitement in their eyes. There was no room for me in that picture. No thought for the one who had made it all possible. Just a casual wave goodbye, a quick text like an afterthought. An ATM transaction completed. The pain I felt wasn't just abandonment. It was something deeper, something colder. It was invisibility. It was as if I weren't even there, a ghost in my own home, in my own life. I was just a means to an end, a quiet source of funds, like an ATM with a heart, useful for withdrawing money, essential even, but with absolutely no right to partake in the joy that money created. My heart, the one that had poured love and sacrifice into every single coin I'd saved, was just a faulty mechanism they chose to ignore. I walked to the living room, the silence of the house pressing down on me. Every cushion on the sofa, every book on the shelf, every ornament felt like a witness to my humiliation. They must have thought that, after giving everything, I had nothing left. No strength to stand up, no spark of fight left in me, no surprise up my sleeve. Just an old woman, worn out, relegated to the background. They pictured me sitting here, perhaps crying, perhaps just quietly resigning myself to my fate. They expected me to simply fade away. Little did they know that the biggest surprise wasn't packed in my small, ready suitcase. No, it wasn't a last-minute flight booking or a fancy gift. It was something far more fundamental. It was in an old drawer they never bothered to open. A place they'd never thought to look, because why would they? They were too busy living their dream, funded by my sacrifice. They were too certain of their ground, too comfortable in their assumptions about me. In that profound silence, as the cup of coffee grew cold in my hand, I didn't plan revenge. The thought didn't even cross my mind, not really. Revenge felt too small, too petty for the vast emptiness I felt. What I planned was something far more substantial. I planned my freedom. A freedom that wasn't about hurting them, but about finally, truly existing for myself. It was a freedom that would begin with a simple phone call, a quiet, determined act, and it would end on the other side of the ocean, yes, in the same city they were heading to. But I wouldn't be in a cramped economy seat, waiting for their calls. I would be in a first-class seat, a place they would never, ever imagine I could occupy. They thought they knew me, thought they understood my limits. They thought I was out of options, out of power. But what they still didn't know was that the ground they walked on so securely, the very foundation of their comfortable lives, was about to tremble, not with an earthquake, but with a quiet, powerful shift they wouldn't see coming. Not yet. That quiet, powerful shift, it wasn't about them, not really. It was about me. My name is Eleanor Vance, and I am 72 years old. 72 years of living, of loving, of making. I was a seamstress for over 40 years, you know? One of those who could tell fabric by touch alone, feeling the weave, understanding the weight. And every stitch, oh, every stitch held a secret of patience, of precision, of making something beautiful and lasting from humble threads. That hum of my sewing machine, it was the lullaby I used to raise my only son, David. Just him and me for a long time after my husband, James, passed away. He was my rock, James was, and losing him, well, it left a space I tried to fill with love for David. After James was gone, all my focus, all my energy became him, David, then his wife Sarah when they married, and then my little granddaughter. Oh, she was the light of my eyes, truly. The kind of grandmother I was, the one who always had an apple pie baking, the one who always had a little something put aside for an emergency. A little cash, a special recipe, a warm hug. Whatever was needed, that was me. Always ready, always there. I remember when David was starting university. It was a big deal, a huge dream for him. Money was tight, always had been for us, but I wasn't going to let that stop him. I sold the jewelry my late husband gave me. Not all of it, but the pieces that had real value. It hurt, letting go of those memories, those sparkling tokens of James's love. But seeing David's face when I told him it was all covered, that tuition, that was worth more than any diamond. And later, when he and Sarah were planning their wedding, and things were getting a bit too expensive for their budget, I sold a small piece of land I owned. It wasn't much, just a little plot on the edge of town, but it helped make their reception beautiful. Every sacrifice, every single one, it was a silent declaration of love, a quiet promise that I would always be there for them. We all lived together, you see, in the large family house. Not just any house. This was the house that James and I built, brick by brick, nail by nail. Every corner held a memory. Every wall echoed with laughter and quiet moments. For me, that place wasn't just a building. It was the symbol of our union, James and I. And then it became the safe harbor where everyone, David, Sarah, my granddaughter, could always return. I took care of everything. The garden, making sure the roses bloomed just right. The cooking, filling the house with the smell of home. And the order, making sure everything was just so. It was my way of caring, my way of keeping our little world together. Whenever David spoke of the house, he would say, "our house," and I would smile, a soft, happy smile. I was so proud, so happy for him to feel like the owner, the protector of the family. He was my son, after all. I never corrected him, never felt the need to wave documents around or prove anything. Why would I? For a mother, a child's happiness is the most valuable deed that exists. It's written on their faces, in their laughter. That's what matters, I thought. My mistake, my biggest one, was thinking they valued the love behind these walls as much as I did. That they saw the invisible threads that held it all together, the sacrifices woven into every part of our lives here. But love, when it's one-sided, doesn't build anything. It just occupies the space you've yielded. It fills up the room, yes, but it doesn't add new walls, new strength. It simply sits there in the space you've given up, while the other person grows, oblivious to the void you've created in yourself. And for them, well, they just kept taking that space. That space they kept taking, it started to feel bigger and bigger. You know how it is when you're used to someone needing you, depending on you. It becomes your rhythm. Then, when that need starts to shift, to subtly change, you feel it. Like a quiet note in a song that's just a little bit off. The idea of the trip to Rome came up one Sunday. Sundays were usually loud, full of the smells of my cooking, the clatter of plates, and my granddaughter's laughter. But this particular Sunday, after lunch, David, my son, and Sarah, his wife, started talking. Their voices were different. Higher-pitched, excited, full of wonder. They spoke excitedly about Rome's ancient history, the Colosseum, the Forum, all those incredible places, its vibrant culture, the food, the art. And then they started talking about showing the world to my little granddaughter, their daughter, the light of my life. I was sitting on my usual sofa, the one by the window where I always do my mending. I just smiled, listening to their dreams unfold. The sun was warm on my face. I remember saying, very quietly, that it had always been my dream too, to visit those ancient ruins, to walk where history lived. I'd seen so many documentaries, read so many books. It had been a quiet wish, tucked away in my heart for decades. They nodded in agreement, David and Sarah both. But their eyes, oh, their eyes didn't really see me. They didn't see the little flicker of hope that lit up in my own old eyes. They only saw the dream, their dream, reflected in each other's faces. And soon enough, they discovered that this big, beautiful dream came with a very high price. That's when David sat beside me. He moved a little closer, and his voice, it got that gentle, soft quality, the one he only ever used when he needed something. It was a practiced tone. I knew it well. He started talking about the importance of creating memories, precious memories for my granddaughter. How good it would be for her, for their family. He painted such a beautiful picture, a tapestry of joy and shared experience. My heart, ever soft for my family, began to melt a little. I imagined seeing her little face light up at the sight of ancient wonders. And then it came, the request. The money from my retirement fund, he said. The one I'd kept so carefully, tucked away for my own old age, for any emergencies. Mom, he said, his hand gently on my arm. You're a part of this. It's an investment in the family's happiness. An investment, he called it. Not a loan, not a gift, but an investment. As if my money would grow, not in a bank, but in their joy. And I, once again, conceded. What else could I do? It was for my granddaughter, for my family. for their happiness. In the following weeks, though, a coldness began to set in. It wasn't a sudden chill, but a slow, creeping frost. They would talk about the trip, but in whispers. If I walked into the room where they were planning, they'd suddenly close their laptop screen, almost instinctively, as if I shouldn't see what they were looking at. When I'd ask about the preparations, the tickets, Sarah would respond vaguely. "Everything's all set, Eleanor. Don't worry," she'd say, waving a dismissive hand. But the worry wasn't about the logistics of the trip. The worry was about their silence. It was about the way their eyes would avoid mine when the topic came up. It started to feel like I was paying for a party to which I wasn't truly being invited. Like I was the caterer, the planner, the financier, but not a guest. The excitement, the details, the shared anticipation, it was all happening around me, but not with me. I'd hear snippets of their conversations, laughter about something and I'd just sit there in my usual chair, stitching a button or peeling vegetables, feeling like a phantom, a silent, invisible benefactor. And with each passing day, my small, hopeful window seat on that plane, the one I had quietly dreamed of, seemed more and more distant. It wasn't just far away in miles, but in spirit. It felt like it was drifting away, out of reach, disappearing into a cloud. I started to wonder if it had ever really been there at all, if my dream had ever truly mattered to them, if I had ever truly mattered beyond what I could provide. The question hung in the air, heavy and unspoken, like a storm brewing just outside the window. That question, it just hung there, heavy and unspoken, but I didn't have much time to dwell on it. The morning of the trip, it arrived with the darkest part of the night. My internal clock, the one that had woken me for decades to sew, to cook, to care, it buzzed me awake at 4 a.m. I was excited. A flutter in my chest, like a little bird taking flight. My small suitcase, packed so carefully with my few essentials, had been ready for days. Just a small bag, tucked by my bed. I wanted to be no trouble. I just wanted to be there. I went downstairs in silence, my steps soft on the old wooden stairs. I planned to prepare a hearty breakfast for everyone, something warm and comforting, a good start for a long journey. The kitchen was still dark, just the way it always was at that hour. But this time, it felt different, too quiet. Usually, even at this early hour, I'd hear a murmur from David and Sarah's room, the rustle of them getting ready. But there was nothing. No light under their door, no sound from my granddaughter's room. I found it strange. A little bell of unease tinkled somewhere deep inside me. I walked to their bedroom door. It was open, just a crack at first. Then I pushed it wider. The bed was made, neatly, too neatly. The wardrobe doors, they were ajar, and I could see empty spaces where clothes should have been. Their bags, the big ones Sarah had bought, they were gone. They had already gone. My heart, which had been fluttering with excitement just moments before, turned to ice. A literal chill spread through my chest, making my breath catch. Gone? How could they leave without calling me? Without a word? Maybe, I thought, desperately clutching at straws. Maybe the taxi arrived earlier than planned. A last-minute change. They must have been in a rush. Yes, that must be it. They'll call any second. I sat down at the kitchen table, the one where we'd shared thousands of meals, thousands of laughs. My cell phone felt heavy in my hand. I stared at the blank screen, willing it to light up, to ring. I waited. The silence of the house pressed in on me, louder than any sound. The coffee machine sat cold and unused on the counter. The breakfast I'd planned to make, it felt ridiculous now. Then, just as the first sliver of dawn began to peek through the window, the screen lit up. Not a call, but a notification. From the family group chat. My finger trembled as I tapped it open, and there it was, a photo. David, Sarah, and my little granddaughter, all three of them smiling widely. Not just smiling, but beaming. They were in the airport departure lounge. The big windows behind them showed planes on the tarmac. The excitement, the pure, unadulterated joy on their faces. It was palpable. And the caption, oh, that caption was a stab, a cold, sharp, direct stab to my heart. We're already at the airport. We'll call you from Rome. In that moment, everything clicked into place. The whispers, the closed laptop screens, the vague answers, the avoidance of my gaze. There was no forgetting, no rush, no last-minute taxi change. There was only a choice, their choice, the choice to leave me behind. They had done it. They had actually, truly abandoned me. I looked around that kitchen again, the same one where I had prepared countless meals, wiped away tears, celebrated birthdays. I looked at the walls that had held my memories, my sacrifices, my life. And for the first time, I didn't feel sadness. Not really. It was something else, a cold, sharp clarity. It cut through the fog of disbelief, through the lingering hope. It was undeniable. They hadn't forgotten me. They hadn't made a mistake. They hadn't simply left me behind. They had discarded me, like an old, broken toy. The silence of the house, which had been a comfort for so long, a place of peace after James passed, it was no longer that. It was now a silence of abandonment, a vast echoing emptiness that swallowed every sound, every thought. And it was in that profound, cutting silence, with the bitter taste of betrayal in my mouth, that I knew exactly what to do. A quiet resolve settled over me, harder and colder than any ice. They wanted to make their own choices? Fine. So would I. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. My eyes were dry. My heart felt strangely calm, almost numb. The tears, they just weren't there. Maybe they would come later, when I was alone, when it was all over. But not now. Now, there was just this quiet, steady certainty. I picked up the cup of coffee from the table, the one I had poured hours ago in my excitement, the one that had sat untouched. As my world shifted, it was already completely cold. I brought it to my lips and drank it in one gulp. The bitter, stale taste filled my mouth. It wasn't just the taste of bad coffee. It was the taste of my new reality. Sharp, undeniable, and a little bit shocking. I walked slowly, deliberately to the living room. My old computer, the one David always made fun of for being so slow, sat on the small desk in the corner. I pressed the power button. It hummed to life with a familiar sluggish groan. The screen flickered, displaying the old, familiar desktop image of a meadow James and I had visited years ago. Every second of waiting for it to fully start up, for the programs to load, felt like an eternity. But in that eternity, there was no impatience, only a quiet reinforcement of the certainty that had settled in my heart. This was it. This was the moment. Finally, the browser loaded. I opened the email, the one with all the flight and hotel confirmations. All of it paid by me, every single cent charged to my card. The numbers, the dates, the names, David's, Sarah's, my granddaughter's, and then mine. Just another passenger, another guest, another forgotten detail. With a calm I didn't even know I possessed, a quiet power simmering just beneath the surface. I looked for the airline's customer service number. I found it, typed it into my phone. A few rings, and a friendly voice answered. "Thank you for calling," she chirped. I took a deep breath. My voice, surprisingly, was steady, clear. I explained there had been a family emergency, a sudden, unexpected change of plans. No need for details, just a quiet, firm request. I need to cancel several reservations, I said. And then, one by one, I listed them. I canceled the return tickets for David, then Sarah's, and then, with a brief pause, for my granddaughter. 3 names, 3 cancellations. The attendant dutifully typed them into her system. I could almost hear the digital unveiling of their perfect trip. It felt clean, not vengeful, but necessary, like cutting off a dead branch so the tree could breathe. Then came the hotels, and the 8 nights at the luxury hotel in Rome. I continued, my voice still even. All of them, she confirmed, her voice still friendly, oblivious to the quiet revolution happening on my end of the line. The unwritten contract, the unspoken agreements, the invisible ties, all of them dissolving into the ether of a simple phone call. And then I did something that made me smile for the first time that day. A small, almost imperceptible smile, but it was there. It reached my eyes, a tiny spark in the emptiness. "I'd like to keep my outbound ticket, though," I said. "And I'd like to request an upgrade to first class, please. I have accumulated airline miles I'd like to use." Another pause, a few more clicks on her end. "Certainly, Mrs. Vance," she replied. "It looks like we have 1 seat available. Would you like me to go ahead and confirm that for you?" "Yes," I said. "Please do." After hanging up the phone, a strange lightness filled me. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was the absence of a heavy burden, the burden of being taken for granted. I stood up from the computer, my movements unhurried, almost ritualistic. I walked to my bedroom, the one I had shared with James, the one that held so many memories. I went directly to my wardrobe, not the clothes, not the jewelry, but the bottom drawer, the one that held my oldest documents, the one they never bothered to open, never even knew existed, probably. I pulled out a plastic folder. It was yellowed with time, crinkled at the edges, a testament to its age and the importance of what it held. Inside it, carefully preserved, was the deed to the house, the official document bearing signatures and seals that proved that this floor I stood on, this ceiling above me, this garden outside the window, everything belonged to me and my late husband, James. It wasn't just our house in sentiment, as David so often said. It was legally, undeniably mine. James, in his wisdom and his deep love for me, had left everything in my name. David, he thought the house was his inheritance, his right. He spoke of it with such certainty, such entitlement. But he didn't know. He never knew. This house wasn't just a place of comfort for me. It was my safe harbor, my quiet strength, my hidden power. It was the one thing they had forgotten I still possessed. They had forgotten that before being David's mother, before being Sarah's mother-in-law, before being the apple pie grandmother, I was Eleanor Vance. And Eleanor Vance, finally, was about to embark on the trip of her life, the ultimate act of self-reclamation, a journey not just across an ocean, but within myself. And they wouldn't even know it was happening. Not yet. The memory of that phone call, those cancellations, it felt like a silent revolution in my own living room. The quiet confidence it gave me, it lingered. For the next 2 days, the house felt different. It was still silent, but it wasn't the silence of abandonment anymore. It was a silence of anticipation. I went about my routines, watered the plants, made my simple meals, but everything felt sharper, clearer. Every breath I took felt like it was truly mine. My mind was calm, clear. I knew what I had done, and I knew what was coming. I wasn't just waiting for them. I was waiting for their world to catch up to mine. And then it happened. 2 days after those quiet phone calls of mine, my phone started ringing. Not just a polite ring, but a frantic, insistent buzz that made it vibrate across the kitchen counter. It was David, from Rome. I looked at the screen, watched his name flash, and let it ring for a few seconds. Just to savor the moment, maybe. Then I answered. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a mix of pure panic and raw rage. It cracked with disbelief. "Mom, what happened?" he practically shouted, the echo of Rome's bustling streets, faintly audible in the background. Our return tickets vanished from the system. Vanished. The airline said our reservation was canceled. And the hotel said our reservation was canceled too. "We're stranded, Mom. Stranded with a child. What did you do? How could you let this happen?" He sounded like a child himself, lost and bewildered, like someone who had stumbled into a situation they couldn't possibly fathom. But I knew exactly what had happened. I took a deep breath, a slow, deliberate one, and let it out. I wanted my voice to be as calm as I felt, as steady as the quiet strength but had settled over me. "I didn't let it happen, David," I replied, my voice even, almost soft. "I made it happen. You two figure it out. You're adults after all." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. It stretched long and thin across the ocean, across the vast distance between us. I could almost hear his mind scrambling, trying to process my words, trying to fit them into the narrative he had always had of me. His always giving, always there mother. He hung up. No goodbye, no further questions. Just a sharp click. Soon after, my phone started buzzing again. This time, it wasn't calls. It was a rapid-fire string of audio messages. From Sarah. Her voice was shrill, laced with fury and what sounded like genuine fear. She was accusing me. Each word was like a small, venomous dart. "You're cruel, Eleanor. How could you do this to us? You've ruined our daughter's vacation, her dream trip. You're just a bitter, vengeful old woman. This is what happens when you snap. You're out of control." Every single word, every accusation was an attempt to put me back in my old place, to make me the culprit, the villain in their story, the one who had wronged them. The news, as these things always do, spread like wildfire through the family. My phone, which had been so quiet for so long, barely used for anything but a quick call to a friend, now wouldn't stop ringing. Cousins called. Aunts called. They all had the same script, the same gentle, chiding tone. "Eleanor, what have you done? You're being extreme. Family resolves things with conversation, not drastic actions. You need to think about your granddaughter. This isn't like you." They painted me as the villain, the out-of-control elder who had simply snapped over a whim. They didn't see the years of quiet service, the hundreds of tiny wounds, the vast ocean of my giving. No one asked me, not one of them. No one asked what David and Sarah had done to me. No one cared about the photo in the family chat, the one with their beaming, joyful faces, my absence a gaping hole. No one cared about the abandonment, the humiliation, the quiet erasure of my presence from their lives. All they saw was their comfortable world disrupted. All they saw was my reaction, not their action. I was completely alone in that understanding, alone in that quiet house. But for the first time, loneliness didn't hurt me. It didn't feel like a heavy cloak settling around my shoulders. Instead, it strengthened me. It solidified the quiet resolve that had been building inside me for weeks, for years. It was a clarity, because I knew with every fiber of my being that the final conversation, the one that truly mattered, hadn't happened yet. And I knew, too, exactly where it would happen. It would be right here, in my house, my home. And this time, I would be the one holding the deed. And this time, I would be the one holding the deed. They returned 3 days later. The front door, the one James and I had painted together years ago, slammed open with a force that rattled the whole house. They'd clearly bought new tickets in a hurry, much more expensive ones, and the stress of it, the cost, the disruption, it hung in the air around them like a dark cloud. I could hear their footsteps, heavy and angry, coming from the hallway. I didn't move from my armchair in the living room. I had been sitting there, the yellowed folder on the small table beside me, waiting. My heart beat steadily, a quiet drum against my ribs. David came into the room first, his face red, twisted with a mix of anger and exhaustion. Sarah was right behind him, her expression a tight mask of fury. They didn't even glance at me, not really. They looked through me, their eyes fixed on some internal accusation. "What kind of game was this, Mom?" David demanded, his voice dangerously low, then rising with each word. He stalked closer, almost right up to where I sat. "I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request." I waited for him to finish his speech, for the last echo of his anger to fade into the quiet tension of the room. Sarah watched me too, her arms crossed, a silent, seething presence. When silence finally fell, heavy and expectant, I simply reached out. My hand, old and slightly gnarled, but steady, moved to the small table beside me. I picked up the yellowed folder, the one containing the proof, the undeniable truth. I took out the deed to the house, its paper brittle and fragile with age, and placed it on the coffee table between us. It wasn't a dramatic gesture, not at all. Just a quiet, deliberate act. But that simple piece of paper, old and fragile, seemed to carry an enormous, crushing weight. It lay there, a silent witness, a monument to everything they had forgotten. David and Sarah stared at the document. Their eyes moved from the paper to my face, then back to the paper, incredulous. Disbelief warred with a dawning horror. David's mouth opened and closed a few times before he managed to stammer out, "What? That's Dad's? It's our inheritance." His voice was a weak whisper now, stripped of its earlier rage. He was looking at me as if I had suddenly grown two heads. "No, my son," I said, my voice calm, clear, completely devoid of anger. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. Your father left everything to me. I allowed you to live here, to build your lives, because I thought we were a family. I thought we were a unit, built on love and respect. I paused, letting my words sink in. But family doesn't abandon. Family doesn't humiliate. Family doesn't discard one of its own. You treated me like an unwelcome tenant in my own home. A silent, invisible source of income, nothing more. The shock on their faces was my only answer. There were no more screams, no more accusations. There was no victory cry from me, no gloating. There was only the truth, raw and unvarnished, laid bare in the quiet living room. They finally saw it. The foundation of their comfortable lives, built not on their rights, but on my quiet generosity. And now that foundation was crumbling. I stood up from my armchair then, slowly, deliberately. I looked at both of them, my son and his wife. My eyes, which had held so many tears for them over the years, were dry and clear. "I am traveling tomorrow," I said, my voice still calm but firm, unyielding, alone. "When I return in 15 days, I want you to have found another place to live. Your mother's house, David, now will be just mine. For the first time in years, perhaps for the first time ever, they looked at me not as the ever-present, ever-providing mother, not as the old woman who simply existed in the background of their lives. They looked at me as Eleanor Vance, the owner of her own story. And in their eyes, I saw not just shock, but a glimmer of fear, a dawning comprehension of the force they had so casually ignored. The silent, empty house would soon be truly silent, and truly mine. The trip was transformative. It really was. Stepping onto that plane the next day, walking past the rows of economy seats to the front, felt like stepping into a different life. In first class, the flight attendant, a kind woman with a warm smile, looked at my ticket, then at me, and called me Mrs. Vance. Not Mom, not Grandma, not just Eleanor, but Mrs. Vance. She offered me a glass of sparkling wine. The tiny bubbles tickled my nose, and as I took a sip, looking out at the tarmac, something inside me just broke, not with sadness, but with relief. Pure, unadulterated relief. The tears came then, quiet and soft, sliding down my cheeks. It was the first true gesture of care I had received in a very, very long time. Just a small thing, a glass of wine and a respectful address, but it meant everything. It was a recognition. In Rome, I walked without rush. Oh, the freedom of it! No one to hurry me, no one to please but myself. I visited the ancient ruins, the Colosseum, the Forum, all the places I had always dreamed of seeing. I stood there, truly present, soaking it all in, feeling the weight of history beneath my feet. I sat in tiny cafes, sipping strong coffee, watching the world go by, and simply read my book. My own book, not one chosen to entertain my granddaughter, or one I felt I should read. Just a story I wanted to get lost in. It wasn't about running away from anything. It was about finding myself, about discovering Eleanor, the woman, underneath all the layers of mother, grandmother, provider. I ate what I wanted, when I wanted. I stopped when my feet ached and rested. It was a gentle, quiet rediscovery of the simple joys of being alive and being free. When I returned home after those 15 days, the house was empty. Not a single trace of them remained, save for faint marks on the carpet where furniture had sat. The silence that greeted me was different from the one I had left. It was no longer a silence of loneliness, a heavy blanket pressing down on me. No, this was a silence of peace, a soft, welcoming quiet. It felt like the house itself had taken a deep, contented breath. It was truly mine again. David and his family had moved to a rented apartment, I learned later through a brief, formal message he sent. The relationship with them didn't end, not entirely, but it transformed deeply, radically. The phone calls, when they came, were now respectful, cautious. There was a new, careful tone in David's voice, a deference I hadn't heard in years. Sarah was quieter too. They visit me on weekends, sometimes with my granddaughter, and I welcome them, of course. My granddaughter, she still runs to me for a hug, and I treasure those moments. But the dynamic has changed entirely. I am no longer their financial safe harbor. I am no longer their emotional dumping ground. The one who cleans up every mess, who smooths every ruffled feather. I am a person with desires, a person with boundaries, and they, finally, seem to understand that. I started to reorganize the house to be just mine. It felt like a fresh canvas. Their old bedroom, the one David had grown up in, the one they had used for years, became my new sewing room. I moved my machine in there, spread out my fabrics, sorted my threads. The light from the window was perfect. It felt right, bringing my craft, my true passion, back into the heart of my home. The garden, once meticulously kept to please everyone, with the roses and neat rows they preferred, now has the imperfect flowers I always loved, the ones with wilder colors that grow a little untamed. It's a little messier now, maybe, but it's my kind of beautiful. I don't live a life of grand luxury now. That's not what this was about. But I live a life of dignity, a life of quiet self-respect. I learned that the greatest power isn't in what you give to others, not always. It's in what you refuse to lose. It's in holding on to that core of yourself, that inner strength, that spark of respect for who you are. That's the real treasure. Happiness isn't a grand, sweeping event, I discovered. It's not about huge celebrations or external validation. It's the sum of small moments of peace that you choose for yourself. Like a quiet morning coffee on my porch, watching my wild flowers bloom, or the hum of my sewing machine, creating something just for the joy of it, just for me. Those small moments of peace, the quiet joy of my wild garden, the steady hum of my sewing machine, just for me, they taught me something profound. They showed me that for most of my life, I had believed that to truly love, to be a good mother, a good wife, a good grandmother, was to annul myself, to quietly disappear into the background, so that others could shine, could grow, could live their big, bright dreams. I poured myself out, endlessly, without ever realizing I was emptying my own cup, leaving nothing for. I learned the hard way, through a searing, undeniable pain, that those who don't see themselves, who erase their own needs and desires, cannot in the end be truly seen by anyone else. If you don't value your own presence, your own voice, why would others? It was a lesson etched into my heart by the coldest kind of abandonment. It wasn't just that they forgot me. It was that they never really knew the me that needed to be seen, because I had always hidden her away. My story, I've come to understand, isn't really about money. It isn't just about a house, or a trip to Rome, or a canceled flight. No, my story is about something much more fundamental. It's about the right to exist as a person, a whole being, with my own thoughts, my own dreams, my own value, independent of what I can do or give to others. For so long, I felt like a silent provider, an ATM with a heart, as I thought that day in the kitchen. My value was measured by my utility, by the funds I could offer, the meals I could cook, the quiet support I could always be counted on for. As an elderly woman, there was an unspoken expectation that I would simply fade, making way for the younger generation, that my needs would naturally shrink, becoming smaller and less important than theirs. My experience laid bare a painful truth. It's easy for others to take advantage of kindness when they forget to see the person offering it. It's easy to treat someone like a resource when you forget they are a human being, with a past, with wisdom, with feelings, with dignity. I had forgotten my own dignity. I had forgotten that respect isn't just given. It's also something you must demand for yourself, quietly, firmly. It's something you show yourself first, by setting boundaries, by saying no when yes means erasing a piece of yourself. The injustice I felt wasn't just about the trip. It was about years of silent erosion, of being. To have my own space, my own peace, my own small joys. I sit here now, in my quiet house, surrounded by my imperfect flowers and the comforting whir of my sewing machine. And I think about it all: the pain, the anger, the shock, the profound sadness of realizing how little I had valued myself. And then, the slow, steady light of finding my way back. It wasn't easy, making that phone call, standing my ground. It felt terrifying at first. But the alternative, the thought of continuing to live as an invisible presence in my own life, was far more frightening. And you? Have you ever felt like a secondary character in your own life, doing everything for those who seemed not to care if you were even there? Have you ever lost sight of your own face in the reflection of someone else's needs? It's a quiet kind of loss, isn't it? One that often goes unnoticed until one day the silence becomes too loud to ignore. And then you have a choice to make. And then you have a choice to make. It's a moment that feels both terrifying and utterly liberating, isn't it? That split second when you realize the silence, the invisibility, the quiet loss of yourself. It's a path you no longer have to walk. And for me, making that choice, standing firm in it, truly was the beginning of everything. The journey back, after I returned from Rome, it wasn't an instant fix. Healing never is. But the house, my house, now truly my own, it felt different. It hummed with a quiet peace I hadn't known in decades. I remember sitting in the living room, the evening sun slanting through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of possibilities, full of me. I started small, reclaiming my space, my routines. I'd wake up when the sun rose, make myself a cup of tea, and just sit on the porch, watching the light change over my garden. My imperfect flowers, the ones with wilder colors and untamed growth that I always loved, they bloomed just for me. No longer worried about keeping things neat for visitors or maintaining a certain image, just beauty for beauty's sake, and for my own quiet enjoyment. My new sewing room, David's old bedroom, became my sanctuary. The light was perfect there. I'd spread out my fabrics, soft velvets, crisp cottons, the silk that glided through my fingers, and the old hum of my machine. It became a soothing melody again. Not a lullaby for a child, but a song of creation for myself. I wasn't sewing clothes for anyone anymore. I was creating for the sheer joy of it. Little quilts, embroidered patterns, even just mending my own things with beautiful, visible stitches. Each one a tiny act of self-care, a quiet affirmation of my own worth. The visits from David and Sarah, they are still a part of my life, but they are different. They call before they come. They ask if it's a good time. And when they are here, there's a new respect in their voices, a caution, an understanding that this house, this woman, is no longer just a given. It's a choice. And so is my presence in their lives. My granddaughter, she still runs to me for a hug. And those moments, oh, they are precious. But I'm teaching her, quietly, by example, that a woman's worth is not measured by her sacrifices, but by her strength, her voice, her own sense of self. I look at David now, and I see a man who is finally starting to understand the invisible ties he took for granted. the weight of love, the cost of neglect. It's a difficult lesson for him, I know, but it's one he needed to learn, and Sarah too. They are building their own life in their own rented apartment, and I hope, in time, they will build it on foundations of respect, not just convenience. I wish them well, truly. My heart isn't bitter anymore. It's just clear. This journey, this quiet revolution, it taught me that my greatest power wasn't in what I gave to others, but in what I refused to lose for myself. My dignity, my autonomy, my right to simply be Eleanor Vance, whole and complete. It wasn't about revenge. Never was. It was about standing up, finally, for the little girl inside me who always wanted to be seen. And you know, happiness, it's not some grand, sweeping event. It's not a destination you arrive at. I discovered it's the sum of these small, quiet moments of peace that you choose for yourself. It's the strength you find when you say, enough. It's the quiet joy of a cup of tea, a blooming flower, the hum of a sewing machine, knowing it's all for you. It's remembering your own value, even when others forget. And sometimes, sharing these parts of ourselves, feeling connected through these quiet truths, that's part of the healing, isn't it? So if you want to keep receiving real stories like this one, pay attention. YouTube might be unsubscribing you without warning. Confirm if you're still subscribed to the channel and activate the bell. May we all find our own path back to peace, one quiet choice at a time. And remember the quiet strength that